Okay, we're good to go. Hello and welcome to Series 2, Episode 6, sorry, of Holistic Emails, Email and More, a Q&A with. I'm your moderator, Skip Fedora, and for those who are new to the show, on every episode, we showcase a different topic with a different panel of experts. And today, we're talking about one of my favorite topics. I'm so excited. We're talking A/B testing, or testing. So those of you who've been with us before know that this is really your show. We bring together the experts, but you drive the conversation with your questions. It's unscripted, it's unrehearsed, and we want to know your burning questions about A/B testing. So please ask your questions using the Q&A button on the right, and feel free to use the chat for, chatting and everything else. And also let us know how we did. Give some feedback at the end. So, Kath, are you going to share your slide?
Oh, thanks for the prompt.
I'll keep going because we'll be to the
At the end.
Yeah. All right. So, as I was saying, please ask your question using the Q&A button on the right. Now, don't worry if your question is too complicated or too long or whatever, just type it all out. Each speaker is going to be available at a round table after the panel. So be sure to pull up a chair, turn on your camera, plug in your mic, and join us as we keep the conversation going in an even more informal setting than this. Now, in addition to chatting with our amazing speakers and meeting some other email marketers, one lucky roundtable participant is going to win a Kindle copy of Kath Pay's book, Holistic Email Marketing. Incredibly. Actually, hold it up again, Kath. Let me see if I can. Oh, I can't. No, I can't. Never mind. I was going to make you bigger.
It's not the Kindle copy, but never mind.
It's not the Kindle copy. No, that's the real physical copy. Now, we are incredibly grateful to our sponsors for helping us get these valuable discussions out to such a wide audience. So the series is brought to you by our gold sponsors, Iterable and Validity, and our silver sponsors, RPE Origin and Email Expert. Thank you all for all you do to make this entire series possible. Now, if you need to catch up on any of these episodes that we've already had on Series 2 or want to go back to Series 1, you can find them on YouTube or on the Holistic Email site. And I am going to put a link in the chat in just a second because I can't do two things at once. Now, we've got some great speakers lined up for you today. With me, as always, is best-selling author and this year's recipient of the EEC Email Marketer Thought Leader of the Year, Kath Pay of Holistic Email Marketing. We also have Emma DeAngelis, the Director of CRM at Vision Direct, and Jen Capstraw, the co-founder and president of Women of Email. And our topic today, as I said, is A/B testing. I'm sorry, those hands really freaked me out. I was like, what is that? So while you're getting your questions into the Q&A area on the right, let's let our panelists quickly introduce themselves. Emma, let's start with you.
Cool. Thanks, Skip. So I'm Emma. I'm Director of CRM for Vision Direct. If you haven't heard of Vision Direct, we sell contact lenses online. So in the UK and several other international markets. We're purely online, so we don't have any stores. And I've been working in email marketing, I think, for just over 9 years now, all that time at Vision Direct, but I've had great exposure to email all the time I've been there. So I've been involved in everything from, actually writing, creating the campaign, segmentation, personalization, A/B testing. So I'm really excited to be here and talk with you guys today.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you very much. Jen?
I'm Jen Capstraw. I am a consultant for MarTech companies in the email space. I'm a public speaker on email marketing strategy and also a little bit of diversity topics as well. Recently started delving into neurodiversity in the email space. I'm best known as president and co-founder of Women of Email, which is the largest organization in the email industry in all of email history, 5,500 members and counting in more than 55 countries. And I sent my first A/B test in 2007. It was terrible.
That's great. That's great. Hopefully we can dive into why it was terrible. That's amazing. Kath?
Hey, I'm Kath Pei. I'm CEO and founder of Holistic Email Marketing. We're a boutique consultancy. We love to do strategic things, and we obviously do them with our clients and for our clients. So we tend to solve a lot of their challenges, or attempt to solve a lot of their challenges. And I've been in the industry now for over 21 years. And yes, as Skip already said, I've just authored a book and won an award. So it's all good.
All good.
Oh, good.
All good. Okay. So we've already got our first question in. Tammy, don't worry, we will get to that. But before we get into that, I wanted to have a chat quickly with everybody. We were having a little chat backstage about, and there were, confusion's the wrong word, but there was some terms being bandied about of different ways to structure a test and what people called it. So I thought maybe we should start there. So what are the different ways that you can structure a test? Maybe Kath, maybe you should pick that up.
Sure. So there's various ways of doing it, and I just want to be sure that everyone knows why we put the A/B split testing in the title was essentially because we want to move away from the testing using sort of like the rendering of your test and checking that your links work and everything. This is actually to work out. We're performing tests here to work out which variant is going to give you the best results, and not just the best results in the short term, but also in the long term as well. And I think that's one of the understated things of, or facets of email testing, is that we tend to look too short term. We don't necessarily, say, okay, what are the learnings? But if we're going to be doing those, there's two different types. There's the A/B split testing, and you can run it various ways. So often you'll do a 50-50 split, and you'll be using variant A and variant B. Variant A can often and should often be your control, so what you're currently doing. And then you have a hypothesis, which is testing that against your variant B, and you've created the variant B to support that hypothesis. And then you've got what Skip likes to call the split stream testing, which is essentially what a lot of the ESPs allow you to do within the systems themselves. And that means that you can go and choose 10%, 20% of your audience, whatever, and you can send variant A and variant B to each of them, so 10% each, possibly. Again, you have to make sure, we're going to go into more detail about this, but you'd have to make sure that sample size is statistically significant. And then whichever is the winner, and the winner will be dependent upon what you have stated the success metric will be. So whether it's opens, clicks, conversions, whatever, it will then send the winner to the remaining, say 80% if you're saying 10% for each of the variants. So we're going to be covering all of that, and it's really up to you. A lot we were discussing beforehand. Sorry, we've got Jonathan coming on.
He's gone, Kath.
No.
Go ahead.
Okay, he's gone. Okay, great. So we were discussing this beforehand, and basically what we were saying was, in the UK, we have smaller lists than in the US, say, for example. And so often we will find that the original one, the A/B split testing, the 50-50, actually is what needs to be done because of the sample size, because of the actual size of the list, the limitations that you have. But there's other ways that we can be working around that, and I'm going to hopefully have the opportunity to talk about that later on.
We'll get to those things later. Now, Jen and Emma, Emma, let's go to you next. Being a practitioner, day to day, how do you typically run your tests for Vision Direct?
Yeah, it's more the 50-50 split that Kath was talking about that we tend to do for both our BAU and our journey. I suppose it's two reasons really. The slipstream testing is sometimes a bit restrictive in terms of you can only select opens or clicks within the system to let you measure that. And sometimes you might want to measure another thing like conversion rate or revenue. Yeah, and I've completely forgotten the other reason. No, the other reason is just, more data, really. We've got bigger, a bigger sample size then, like 50-50 split between our audience. And we like looking at data and kind of reviewing it, discussing it, building our hypothesis for the next test and so on.
And
Excellent.
I mean, if I can just, I've worked with Emma, and because this is what I was referring to then, they also, because when you're doing the 50-50 split, it's not always for that immediate result, right? You're going to be sending 50% the good and 50% the bad version, yeah? So it's very much for the long-term learnings, the insights and everything. So it really does depend also what your immediate objectives is for running the test as well. But Vision Direct are very much into getting those learnings, those insights, and then building that into their future email campaigns moving forward, both automated and also, manually sent ad hoc campaigns.
Well, that's a really good point, Kath. I mean, the problem with the split stream testing or the champion challenger is it's really easy to do a test that well, we'll get into it here in a second about subject line testing, but it's really easy to test 2 subject lines and pick a winner. But that doesn't mean you've got a learning. You've just picked a winner. You haven't taken anything from that you can apply again going forward. Now, so Jen, you mentioned you ran your first A/B test in was it 2007? Did you say?
2007, yes.
And you said it didn't go well. Don't have to tell us about that, but in terms of structuring a test, what have you learned since then? If you were going to sit down with a brand marketer, what's your go-to advice in terms of how to structure a test?
Well, I did a lot of really stupid tests, so you don't have to. Basically, is the undercurrent of everything that I like to teach people about testing. Are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect? No? Okay. I definitely recommend that you look this up. Go ahead, Skip.
Is that the Nelson Mandela is dead, but he wasn't dead effect?
That's the Mandela effect.
Oh, right. Of course. All right. So no, I don't know.
Okay. So Dunning-Kruger is a theory surrounding cognitive bias. When you know very little about a subject, your confidence in your understanding of that subject is quite high. And that is why we have so many expert virologists on social media right now. And then as you learn more about something, your confidence in your knowledge actually declines until you kind of get to a point where you think you know nothing about the topic. And then you start like a slower upward ascent. And look it up, Dunning-Kruger, give it a Google. And once you become familiar with it, you'll apply it to like everything in your life. And I feel like A/B testing very much is we're all on this Dunning-Kruger scale. And I personally, I started out with that very high confidence. I know everything about A/B testing because I went to a webinar and I read some blogs, and I'm going to do this really poorly executed test, and I'm going to stand behind the results and tell my boss that I'm right because I have the results to back it up. And after doing really bad tests for many, many years, I had the light bulb moment. What am I doing? What am I actually improving here? Am I going through these motions because I read it on a blog, or am I going through these motions because it's actually optimizing and delivering results? And what I learned was, in many instances, I was wasting my time, especially when I was in that marketing unicorn position where every little thing that I did added up and I just had to accomplish so much. And so throwing a test in there, even a simple A/B subject line that's totally automated by the ESP, it's a little extra effort, it's a little more reporting, and I wasn't testing smart. So I think that everyone needs to know when to test. And if there's not really an opportunity to deliver more value, like if it's just you're testing for the sake of testing, that's a bad reason to test. If there's an opportunity to make more money, then that is an excellent reason to test. Think about your bandwidth. Is your time better spent executing testing the right way? And I'm sure Kath has a lot of opinions about the right way. And to do it correctly is an investment of effort and analysis and learning over time. But if you are just kind of slapping things together and doing it because you heard you should do it, then you're not really getting a lot of value out of that. You're just wasting your time. And maybe you should spend your time doing something else entirely. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot to unpack there.
I mean,
I'd
like to build. I'd like to build on. So not just the when, but it's the how. And I think this is what you were really sort of pointing towards too. Is like you said, and we are very, very much guided here in the email marketing world by the ESPs and the tools that they give us, and the tools that the ESPs give us are perfunctory, in my opinion, as far as A/B split testing goes. And one of the things that's missed out in all of the education is working with that hypothesis. Now, if you were to, it's really, really simple. If you were to go, okay, now what's going to give me a different result, this versus this? You are mindfully saying you've got two very different things and you're going to test them against each other, as opposed to we're doing it without a test. Do you know what you're going to naturally come up with? This is what most of them come up with without a hypothesis. You're going to be testing this versus this. Therefore, the chances of you actually getting a winner is minimal. If you start to use a hypothesis, that's going to give you the ability to determine how different do I want them to be. You know, what am I doing here? And you use all of your learnings, your insights, your knowledge about your business, about your consumers and everything to actually formulate that hypothesis. And you're going to give yourself a better chance of actually getting a result that actually works. And I think that's one of the things that is not spoken about enough here. If you go to any conversion, conversion optimization conference, what are they going to talk about? Hypotheses. That's it. That's the basis of everything. You know, why is it good for them and it's just totally irrelevant for us? It shouldn't be, because we are a push channel. Therefore, it's actually easier for us to be performing tests than it is for them, because they have to attract the audience somehow, usually by search or PPC or paid audience somehow, banner ads or whatever, and to actually drive the traffic to the pages, whereas we already have the traffic because that's our database. So it's so much easier. So we should still be applying the same principles to actually doing it. And the first place to start is with a hypothesis.
So Kath, that's a great intro or segue into Andrea Bowen's question, who's senior manager CRM at Circle, who asked, and Emma, I'm going to kind of throw this over to you, but click rates, looking at trying to test creatively how to test outside of call to action copy, button placement. What's the secret sauce to test for increasing click rates? And to Kath's point, and you alluded to this earlier, that sometimes you don't do the A/B testing in your marketing platform because they only look at click-through rates or they only look at open rates, and you want to start to look at conversion rates and how far down the purchase funnel people get. So what's your secret sauce?
For increasing the click rate, I think it probably depends a little bit on obviously your business and case by case. But for us, we very much review the performance of the last campaign, and that helps us to build the hypothesis that Kath was talking about, and then think about how we could increase the click rate. So a recent test that we did, our emails are structured very much in the same way. So we have headline, then what we call like the subheader, then the banner. So we had a theory that if we removed the subheader, we would increase the click rate, because we knew that people, I think, were spending on average 5 seconds reading our email, was the data that we had. So we thought, the headline is telling them, in most instances, sometimes almost the same thing as the subheader. So if we remove that, they're going to get through to the CTA. They're going to see the CTA button earlier and they're going to click on it. But actually, we did that test, and the result we saw in the UK market was the reverse. So actually the one with the 2 lines of copy performed better. So, but in the other markets, some of our international markets, that without the subheader was much more effective. So yeah, that was one of our recent learnings.
Yeah, and also, and you know, we just need to stay here, right here and now. If you create a hypothesis, and I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of marketers steer away from it, because they don't want to be proven wrong, right? So for one of the countries, you were wrong, right? Your hypothesis was not actually supported and proven, right? But it worked for the other countries. So you didn't feel like you were a failure, did you? You went, okay, we have learned something valuable now that we can carry out. And so, you know, I just want to say to anyone, if you use a hypothesis and, you know, you've used all of your knowledge, your experience and your know-how, and your hypothesis is not proven to be correct, don't worry about it. You have not failed at all. And just another thing too, when we worked with you, Emma, you also were testing a lot of motivations as well. You know, benefits versus, you know, discounts and things like that. These motivations from all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tests that I've performed and also observed with my clients, we find that they actually give bigger uplifts than more of a, you know, the factors as such, let's say, you know, just a call to action or the positioning of things like that. So if you're wanting to really give an uplift, look at your audience and test different motivations. And you know, I think that would help a lot.
The problem with when you're testing something aside from something that's driving open, so you're trying to test something that is going to drive those clicks. First of all, the metric you should be looking at would be click to open rate rather than click rate, because that is going to give you a more accurate idea, because your test groups are two different sizes. It's whatever number of people in each test group happen to open and also click. So click rate in and of itself is not the best metric for determining a creative test. Also, Kath, you mentioned early on, like, you need to know that your test is statistically significant. And when you get into these smaller tests, these creative tests, things that are not subject lines or send time or pre-header or from name, everything else, the number of people you're testing is only the number of people that have opened. And so your ability to achieve statistical significance has diminished by quite a bit. And generally speaking, not always the rule, there are sometimes exceptions. Generally speaking, the best way to get more clicks, more conversions, and so forth is to focus on maximizing open rate so that you've got more eyeballs there, more opportunities to get people to the click, to get people to the landing page, to get people to the conversion, and there's that ripple effect. There are certainly exceptions, and people love to call those out. You know, that one time I wasn't testing for opens, I just wanted clicks, and we can have those debates if anyone wants to throw those out there.
Yeah, so it's interesting, because the other thing you've got to really make sure that when you're doing something, certainly something like creative, but basically for any test, you don't, in specifically so if you're doing it for a hypothesis, you want to be testing multiple times, because the first time could be an anomaly. Maybe, you know, something happened in the stock market, or there was a hurricane or something like this. You never know. Or it doesn't even have to be that, you know, obvious. But you have to be testing it multiple times. Now, the beauty about this also then gives you, if you have got a smaller database, then you can actually be testing the same hypothesis, but using different copy, different call to action, different anything that you want to be testing, but it's still using the same hypothesis, and therefore you can actually then kind of like add it up until you have got a you know, statistically significant result, and you have got your clear winner then. So yeah, so start sort of thinking outside the box there.
I got to jump in here though, because I do have a question. One of the questions I'd written down is, do sample sizes matter? But let's take that one step further. You know, so I come from a statistical background. You know, my university degree is in political science, and it's all about research and polling and getting a statistically significant 1,000 people to tell you how the whole U.S. is going to vote. And you know, that those kind of questions are important. Or if you're testing the efficacy of a vaccine, statistical significance is important. how important is, or maybe I should ask the question a different way, at what level of confidence would you all be happy to say, yeah, this test is a winner. This is the learning. I mean, do you wait till you're 98% sure or 95% sure, or is 60% sure good enough?
I'd be going minimum of 90%. Particularly if you're doing this which is what you would be doing if you're using a hypothesis as a long-term learning, and you're going to be implementing it into either your automated campaign or your program or the rest of your campaign. So what Emma was just doing, do we have the 2 lines above, or do we remove them, and everything like this. So you want to be testing it multiple times, and you want to be confident that those results are valid. So the minimum I would be going with was 90%. If you never get to statistical significance, because then you need to rework your hypothesis, look at it, because maybe it doesn't actually have an impact. And those kind of tests do happen, right? They definitely do happen. And sometimes you have to just go, that's how it is,
And sometimes you really have to, again, consider, is this worth testing? Is the opportunity cost too high? So everyone in this group has run into those issues with audiences that are really small, and it's hard to get that statistical significance. And so you're doing the 50-50 split to observe trends over time and have those learnings that you can apply. And so you want to be very careful of a test like that you're not wasting that opportunity, that you are not intentionally doing like, here's my bad version and here's my good version. Like, you don't want bias to drive your hypothesis, because then you are sending bad marketing to 50% of your audience. And so that means your success with that test group is going to be lower. Is that worth it? Like, if you have a learning and a certain approach is more effective with your audience, send it to 100% of your audience, right? So you want to send your test to the smallest group of people possible to maximize the value of the results. And that gets trickier and trickier the smaller your audience is. And I've been there. I faced it. So test wisely.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And going back to I think combining those 2 points is really important, because as Kath pointed out a minute ago, you can test something and prove your hypothesis, but unless that's repeatable, it's not a learning. It's only a learning if it's repeatable over time. And if you have to run the same test over a number of campaigns just to get a statistical significance on your hypothesis once, then, to get a learning, you've got to run it again. So, if it takes 4 campaigns, actually now you're using 8 campaigns to test this hypothesis. Back to Jen's point, is the opportunity cost of those 8 campaigns worth it? So Emma, question for you, at the coalface, and I can't remember her name, but I was having a lovely chat with your email person at the roundtable before the event. She comes to you with an idea for a test. How do you decide, that's a good thing to test, let's build a hypothesis around that, or actually, no, that's not, either it's going to be too hard or it's going to not get us the right lift we want? How do you prioritize?
Usually we regularly review our emails. So I guess if she's coming to me with an idea, perhaps asking, what's that based on? Like, is it based on data, a theory, results from a previous campaign? For example, we had a campaign that didn't perform very well, a promotional offer, and the theory was that we were too vague about what the offer was. It was like, just get a free gift. So then off the back of that, we kind of, we thought, okay, next time we do this offering, perhaps we need to test saying what the free gift is versus being more vague. So I think I'd be looking for some data or some previous learning that we've had to kind of back up the reasoning behind wanting to do this new test, really.
Okay, that's interesting. So it just builds on itself over time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we've got better at over time is really sharing our learnings from A/B testing. So I think you kind of fall into the trap of as an email marketer of just doing a test and then not really talking about it with, other people within the marketing department. But if you share those learnings, it's a really good opportunity to get people's insights, brainstorm together and come up with new ideas and build a list basically, and then start to prioritize that into your plan and your schedule.
Okay. I don't want to get off sample sizes for totally, but Emma, I just want to follow up on that point quickly. Do you ever collaborate with the web, the web team to say, okay, we're actually going to run a test that carries through, whether it's a line of copy or a way to structure an offer or whatever?
We are starting to collaborate a lot more now, but probably, for example, we did a sale recently and we did run the same test on email and on the website in terms of the messaging, using different platforms though, to do the testing, and we did see the same result in both of those tests. So the banner that was giving more information about what the offer was won significantly more than the one that was a bit more vague.
That's interesting.
So
okay, so go ahead, Kath.
This is all about the statistically significant as well. So I'm staying on topic, Skip. But
yeah. Are you going to answer Ryan's question?
No, I haven't read it. But what I just wanted to say
we'll get to that in a second. Don't worry about it. We'll get to that in a second.
What I wanted to say was, when you're doing your test, if you also have ownership over landing pages, then you can carry that same test through to the landing page as well. So you're using the same hypothesis and it travels through, so that you're also not testing just 2 emails, but you're testing 2 landing pages. Obviously, they're going to go through the same variant, right? And the fact that you're doing that is also going to make your results more robust. I'll save this one for later. I was going to say there's another bit of a controversial thing, but I'll save it for later.
I want to hear the controversial thing.
Okay, well, my controversial thing is, right, if we're not just talking about testing a call to action, or if we're not just talking, if we're not focused on a factor, an individual factor. So your hypothesis doesn't say the subject line, but you're actually talking about the motivation, right? So does benefits deliver better results versus scarcity, right? So now you've got your stream A with of the email, and it can have subject line, call to action, first paragraph. It can have imagery, everything all supporting benefits. Your landing page can do the same. And then your variant B will be scarcity, and so subject line, call to action. So now I am saying that, when everyone always says to you, you can only test 2 factors at a time, I'm talking about, it's not necessarily factors. It's talking about 2, they are factors. So if you want to pull it into, so motivations, benefit versus scarcity, you're still only testing 2 things, but it's now given you the ability to actually open up and test multiple parts of the email and the landing page, all supporting that same hypothesis though. So you're staying true to that, and that's going to give you a better result, a more robust result, a true result, because you're not just testing, okay, the benefits in the subject line, is that going to give us an uplift, right? So so that's slightly controversial.
Is it? I mean,
I like it. I think it's a great point. But the only problem, I think it's worthwhile, and I think it's very smart. The only problem is that if you come to the conclusion that, okay, scarcity is what's going to drive my conversions, and then you go 100% in that direction, it can lose its effectiveness over time.
Absolutely.
So we have to just not read too much into this is the end all be all test, and that's it. But yeah, I agree with that approach.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Jen, I want to get back to that point, because I think it's a very important point. But Kath, you got to tell us, who thinks that is a controversial approach?
So if you read any articles, right, they say only test 2 things, right, 2 factors in your email, and that all the articles are saying that.
What they'll say is, test 1 thing. You've got a version A and a version B. with one variable. But in my mind, you haven't added multiple variables.
So, okay, you kind of broke up my end, so I didn't quite hear it. But all I'm saying is that, and even when I speak to the people who are saying that, they still say, oh, you can't test a subject line and a call to action at the same time, because what they're doing is they're thinking that you're not using a hypothesis. And under that basis, you cannot test a subject line and a call to action unless they're supporting the hypothesis. So if you actually did a benefit-driven subject line and you said, oh, let's also try and see if a long call to action versus a short call to action, then you've got a multivariate test there, haven't you? And then it's really hard to determine the winner. But as long as you are supporting in your call to action is benefit-driven or scarcity-driven, according to which variant you're using, then you're still only testing the two. But most marketers that I have worked with haven't interpreted it that way at all. And they go straight away to, but you can't test two, right? So I think
yeah. I think that's so a couple of things for me on that one. Can we agree as a group of people, and if anybody in the audience disagrees with this, stick it in the chat. But I think we should just say that if you're not using a hypothesis, you're not testing. You're playing around.
I agree. Yeah.
It depends on what kind of test you're running, right? If you are doing a manual test, that's what we have described up to this point, where you conceive the test, you set it up within your ESP, and off it goes. But you can optimize using some better tools. And Kath mentioned that the tools that ESPs offer are often perfunctory. Some are a little more sophisticated than others. There are some third-party technologies you can apply, and you just kind of let them do the work of optimizing in real time. And I know Iterable is a sponsor of this session. I like the iterable testing solution because they allow you to do up to 10 variations. Because more splits gives you better results. Like if you can easily predict who your winner is going to be, then you're not running an effective test. If you've got 10 different versions, you have no idea which one is going to win. And they should all be very diversely different. And so I like that about their solution, but they also have the multi-armed bandit test for automated campaigns. So they are constantly optimizing in real time, and they're changing from one moment to the next. One version's working really well today, another version's working well tomorrow, and it's shifting and it's changing all the time. And there's just not a lot of ESPs out there that offer that kind of functionality. And Phrasey just introduced something like that, a third-party version of that can integrate with your ESP. So we don't have to go through these exercises of, gosh, I don't understand statistical significance, and I'm struggling to create tests that matter, and I don't know if I'm actually optimizing effectively. Sometimes you don't even have conclusive proof as to why something works. Sometimes correlation does not equal causation, and more sophisticated technology does the work that our human brains are not capable of doing, especially email marketers who are not statisticians. So our technology is just starting to catch up to our needs. If you ask an email marketer what their testing needs are from a technology standpoint, then they're going to be like, I need version A, version B, and I need to be able to set it for so many hours, and I need to be able to determine a winner based on, this KPI or that KPI. And so that's what ESPs are giving us. And it's not good enough.
Yeah, I agree with you. The problem I have with optimization, especially automated optimization, is that the base assumption is you started from a good place. And I remember I did a test for British Gas years ago, and we were testing service messages. Wow, was it going to be dull? But they had budget and they were interested, so we. And I worked for an agency. So what does an agency do when you're given a creative brief? You create 3 options. The one the agency likes, the one the client will like, and then the one that's kind of a throwaway. And the client bought them all. And they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to eye track these to see which one gives us the best starting point. And before we do that, everybody in the room, so there's about 20 of us, pick the one you think is going to win. We all did. Nobody picked the throwaway. When we got to the eye tracking, the throwaway won. And we would have never been able to optimize into that design. So we would have been able to optimize whichever design we'd picked, but that just makes it the best of a bad lot. So I think I always worry if somebody's just said, oh, well, we'll optimize into it, because I don't think you can. But I do like the fact that you can test, once you get over 5 variations on something, now you're dealing with portfolio theory, which means, one's going to be best, one's going to be worst. The other ones are going to be somewhere in between, but your downside risk of upsetting your audience or turning off your audience because you really screwed up a test is much lower.
And one of the things too that I've always had trouble with, I'm not going to mention who, but one of the AI subject line products is that they come up with all of these subject lines, which is brilliant. 10 subject lines. 9 of them are AI. One's manually written by a human, and then they'll choose the winner. But at the end of the day, you don't know why, right? Because there's no hypothesis. There's no, we've written this subject line because of this. This is what we're testing here and everything like that. So you're doing a test, but at the end of the day, you can't walk away with any learnings. And so I think that's very restrictive. So what I want to do is I'm always wanting to be, as Jen was saying, that continually optimizing and learning and implementing those learnings into your campaigns and understanding what works. So actually, one of our clients, they did it in arrears. They worked with them for a year, and then afterwards, they went in and they actually identified and put down all of them. The motivations towards all of them, what it was, and then they worked out what their sort of like winning formulas were for their subject lines. So because that for them was the key thing. It wasn't just for the immediate uplift. It was for understanding for future campaigns.
But it's not in either order. You can do both, right? You should definitely be doing those longer term tests to understand, does scarcity work, for example, the example you gave earlier. And you can also be utilizing better technology to do this deeper level of optimization. So these things can go hand in hand. And our human brains, you're right when you say we don't always know why something works. And that's why you can let AI figure that out for you and constantly be optimizing on that, because it's not just one thing. There can be so many factors that go into the reason that something is successful in a single moment, and then something else is successful in a different moment, or this worked for that campaign, and something else worked for another campaign. And our brains will never be able to wrap around all of those little nuances. And so we need technology to help us with those limitations. So put these things together for the ultimate in optimization, from my point of view, make it all work for you.
Yeah, and I can see from...
Sorry,
I was just going to say, from a practical perspective, that's a dream, and it works beautifully for automated programs. But for an ad hoc campaign-based email, I think you're still best to start off with your hypothesis and testing it that way. And then you can always go and be modifying everything accordingly. You can even go in and modify the continually enhanced by AI marketing automation programs as well.
Oh, we lost.
I know, you lost me.
But Jen, you just, I don't know if you saw it in the chat, but Naomi West is definitely a big fan of the multi-armed bandit test, taking so much work out of testing. And I think you're right. I think it's a combination of the two. In an ideal world, our testing would create, like I used to pick on anybody that wrote a best practice guide, even though I'd written a couple for the DMA and some other stuff, because the best practice guide is right. It's not best practice. It's what a bunch of people, usually a committee, decides is probably the best thing to do. But like, for example, best practice would be double opt-in. Not always, but in some situations, right? And so then you start to get into, well, it's not best practice for us. And so testing is how you get to best practice for us as a brand. One last question, and then I want to get off sample sizes for a second, or forever. But we talked a lot about statistical significance, and we talked about why it's important, and we talked about what level we need to get to. But Ryan Phelan from RPE Origin, thank you for sponsoring, asks, what's the amount needed for statistical significance, or how do you calculate the sample size you need for statistical significance? Does anybody want to geek out for a second and kind of go into the maths behind it, or should we just...
No, you use a calculator. Yes. That makes your life easier. And I have one with my own personal short link so that it is always memorable for me and people that I share it with. So jen.tips/test. It will tell you when you shouldn't test. It'll tell you when you should do a 50-50 split and you might get a learning. And it will also tell you how many splits you should do. Well, so we're not smart enough. We're not smart enough to do this in our puny human brains. And also we're not statisticians.
Well, apparently.
Oh, I was going to say, I know a lot of statisticians who would be like, oh, well, it's really simple. You take the sum of the da, 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 da. I mean, I can't do it. I've got a spreadsheet that I use that I've had with me since. So Jen, you said you ran your first test in 2007. I ran mine in 1999, and I've had a friend of mine who was a statistician gave me this spreadsheet. He's like, look, I've done all the math for you. You just plug your numbers in these two boxes, and it'll tell you your what your level of confidence is. And you're right. Once you've got that tool, whatever that tool is, you live and die by that tool.
Yeah.
So we touched on something a little bit earlier. I mentioned it when we were talking about portfolio theory, but Jen and Kath, you've touched on it a little bit as well. And it's about the sort of the risk inherent in testing and upsetting or not upsetting, getting it wrong, right? So if you do an A/B test, one wins, one loses. The people that got the loser got a suboptimal experience. Emma, do you ever worry about that, or do you make sure that if you've got your hypothesis versus your control, that people are you real rigorous about the same people always get the control versus the hypothesis, or do you mix and match and re-swizzle every time, or how do you do that?
Yeah, we just random split every time. I wouldn't say that we are too worried about people that get I wouldn't call it bad. I mean, it's just like our standard, campaign that we've already optimized. Like, it's already quite optimized. So we don't worry too much about that, I would say, from our side. We just take it as a long-term learning, and we don't kind of see it as a maybe not such a good campaign, if that makes sense.
And do you guys use a holdout?
That's what I was going to ask.
Like a control group, do you mean? Or
no, like somebody that doesn't get any email?
Oh, no, we don't actually do that. No, that isn't. I think it's something we've discussed in the past, but for us, email is a really effective channel. I think maybe the nature of the products that we sell as well, because obviously it's a replenishment product and people do need to reorder it at a certain time. So it's maybe a little bit different to kind of, a retail browsing experience.
Yeah.
I'd actually love to hear Kath's perspective on holdouts.
Yeah, so I come across that a lot with my clients. When I mention holdouts, they're just like, we can't afford not to send everyone emails. That's it, because email drives the revenue. So it's a tough one because if you're being a purist also with email, and when you're doing your tests and everything, you're sort of going, well, really, we need to have that holdout group to actually not just see the difference between the A and the B, but also has A and B actually given us an uplift altogether? So if they're not getting, email as well. But there's lots of, actually, I know Della's done a lot of research into this. And he has done holdouts with his clients and everything. So this is just, we're now talking not so much the A/B split testing, but we're just talking about now the value of email altogether.
Well, that's the risk of a holdout, right? Is you could prove that your email doesn't work. That, you know, people say, "Oh, I can't use a holdout because we make so much money off email." Are you sure? Do you know? I'm not, Emma. I'm not putting you on the spot.
Fairly confident that they're making money on email, right? So it always kind of frightens me when companies are doing like year-long holdouts, right? Suppressing 5 or 10% of their entire audience to prove the value of email. The opportunity cost is high. Like that could be 5 or 10% of your email-generated revenue compromised for the year. And so it always makes me really uncomfortable. Like I understand that it gives you the math to prove, you know, that it works, it doesn't work, but is it worth the cost? For me personally, it just doesn't seem like the right decision. Like we can assume that email makes money.
What about the flip side? Use it as a way to get budget, and to prove your worth. You know, so basically, if you've got a holdout, you say, well, look, if we didn't have this department, this is how much money we would be leaving on the table. And if we put more money into it, this is how much money, even with an email department, we're leaving on the table because we're not fully optimized.
Yeah, but now we're also getting into a little bit into attribution, but also the fact that you're holding out, and like Jen said, you said for a year, that is a bit horrific, because then what is your plan to bring these people back into the fold of email after they've not received email for a year? There's a good chance that, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like
and these were loyalty customers.
Oh no!
I think it was 10%. It might have been 5%, but they were doing loyalty holdouts, and they stood by it. And I was like cringing. It's millions of dollars on the table.
What was their hypothesis though? What was the reason for them doing it? Sorry, Skip.
Just to prove the value of email. And they did it for years. It had just become their standard best practice. We assign everyone, when they enter the loyalty program, they're assigned a number 1 through 10. And this year, number 1 is suppressed. Next year, number 2 is suppressed. Following year, number 3 is suppressed, and so on. So your group number never changes for the duration of your relationship with the brand. And every 10 years, you didn't get email for a year.
You know, that's pretty old school, because we used to do that in, you know, when I was before email, when I was doing DM. You know, we would do that regularly with DM just to prove the value of DM. But the Jen, to your point, the opportunity cost of lost revenue versus the actual cost of DM, that's a really different equation than the opportunity cost of lost revenue in email versus the cost of email. Now, we're coming up on time, but there are a couple of, and this has been a fascinating conversation, but I do want to get to a couple of practical questions. First off, I really feel bad. Poor Tammy has been listening to this entire conversation, and I did say we'd get to her question, you know, half hour ago, and we haven't. So Tammy's question is, so she does B2B, and she wants, she's looking for examples of subject line tests that have given significant learnings. She says recently, but you know, I think any is there in terms of finding a true winner as opposed to this one is slightly better than that one. Are there any tips that anyone wants to give in terms of how out there you're willing to go with a test?
So it'd be interesting to see what you're currently doing. So I don't know what it is, but often I find when I'm working with B2B, they tend to, because they're working with B2B, so they're thinking we're business to business, and they tend to speak to the business rather than the individual. The individual is the one that's either going to make the decision or is putting the business case together to help make the decision or something. So they're the individuals you need to be influencing and affecting and helping. So you still need to be very, you know, how is this product going to help them? So on, and still be very, very individual. So again, I don't know. You may already be doing this, in which case this information is useless. But if you are sort of talking more generically, you know, from the business to business, you know, how does your business stand up or something? Or how can you, versus how can you save time, right? So you're talking to the individual rather than just the business. That's always a big uplift, I find, when we're doing our tests.
Those B2B lists can be quite small, and so tests can be very difficult, and you may have very inconclusive results. So I like Kath's approach for like testing different kind of overarching themes over a period of time, and then because that is a huge level of effort, you want to focus in on the step in the life cycle that matters the most. So people who are in market for your product, they're the ones worth testing. They're the ones that you really want to optimize for so that you can turn them into a meaningful conversion. All of the other stuff, you could test it if you have the time, you have the bandwidth, you have the resources, but use your time wisely. And that's where I would focus. Where is the greatest opportunity?
Jen, that's a great place to transition over to the round table. So Tammy, I would suggest you hop on a round table with either Kath or Jen. That's a great question we can dive into. Also, Chelsea just asked a great question that we aren't going to have time to get into, but will also make a great roundtable discussion around the quality of subscribers you're testing, and should you be segmenting your tests by audience or segmenting your audiences by tests. Either way, but we can get into all that on the round tables because unfortunately that is all we have time for today. Please let us know your thoughts on the overall session by leaving us your comments in the chat. Don't forget, before we move out of the event, grab that link that Jen put in the chat. That's a great one. Join me in giving a big thanks again to our gold sponsors, Iterable and Validity, and our silver sponsors, RPE Origin and Email Expert. And of course, a tremendous thank you to Emma, Jen, and Kath. This has been a great discussion. I wish we had another hour or two because this could go on for a while. So much fun. So thank you so much for joining us today. Now, most of all, I want to thank all of you for spending your time with us today. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with Kath and Adiola Sol from Holistic Email Marketing, Deborah Badu from M&S International, and Chris Marriott, President and founder of Email Connect. And we're going to be covering another one of my favorite topics, shiny new tools, solutions, or distractions. For those of you who've joined us live, we have set up the roundtables, as we've discussed. And this is your opportunity to continue the conversation. It looks like it's going to be a good one with our panelists and meet other marketers who are going through the same challenges with their testing that you are as well. So go find a table, turn on your sound and video, and be part of the conversation. Now, don't worry if you're wearing that oh so comfy but slightly tattered hoodie. We're not going to judge. Conversations aren't recorded. It's a safe place. We're all going to have a lot of fun. And remember, one lucky roundtable participant will win the Kindle version of Kath's book, Holistic Email Marketing. But if you can't join us, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Until then, be safe and make good choices.